My name is Thomas Reed. I'm 79 years old. I spent 40 years becoming the safest man I knew. I paid every bill early. I avoided debt. I saved constantly. I protected my family from financial fear. And now my children speak to me the same way people speak to a polite neighbor. Carefully, briefly, like someone they respect, but do not really know anymore. If you think responsibility automatically feels like love, you need to hear this story. Because I thought I was building security. I was actually building distance. I did not see it happening. That's the worst part. Nothing exploded in my house. Nobody screamed. Nobody slammed doors. My family just slowly stopped bringing me their joy. And by the time I noticed, decades had passed. Last Thursday, my granddaughter Abby sat at my kitchen table eating cereal before school. She's 8 years old. Still missing her front tooth. Still talks with her whole face. She looked around my kitchen for a second. At the clean counters. The quiet room. The clock ticking above the stove. Then she looked at me and asked, "Grandpa, did you ever do anything fun?" I laughed immediately. A reflex. I said, "Of course I did." But even while I said it, something inside me tightened. Because my mind went blank. Not completely blank. Worse than blank. I could remember work projects from 1994. Interest rates, mortgage payments, tax deadlines. But I could not immediately picture one warm, ordinary moment where I was fully there with my family. Not checking the time, not calculating cost, not worrying about tomorrow. Just there. That scared me more than I can explain. That night, after Elaine went upstairs, I walked out into the garage. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me already knew where this was heading. The garage smelled like dust and motor oil. I stood there in the dark for a minute before pulling the chain on the overhead bulb. And there it was. An old cardboard box on the top shelf. I hadn't touched it in years. I dragged it down onto the workbench. Inside were things I had saved for decades. Unused baseball tickets, expired restaurant coupons, travel brochures folded neatly in thirds. A county fair flyer from 1989. A little envelope marked, "Maybe next summer." I sat down on an overturned paint bucket and stared at those papers. And for the first time in my life, they did not look organized. They looked haunted. Every single thing in that box had once been a plan, a small joy. A simple afternoon. A memory waiting to happen. And almost every one of them ended the same way. Maybe later. Not right now. We should save the money. After things settle down. I used those phrases for so many years, they became my personality. Let me tell you something I learned much too late. A family does not disappear all at once. You lose them in inches. In little moments that feel too small to matter. A delayed trip. A rushed dinner. A child's excitement quietly shut down. A wife who eventually stops asking. That's how it happened in my house. Not through cruelty, through caution. I was not a bad man, at least, I never thought I was. I loved my wife. I loved my children. Everything I did made sense to me at the time. That's what makes this so hard to live with now. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, in a house where money was always tense. My father worked construction, my mother stretched every dollar until it nearly tore apart. I remember hearing them whisper through the bedroom wall late at night. Bills. Repairs. Past due notices. I remember my mother crying quietly once because our water heater broke in January. I was maybe 11. I didn't fully understand the conversation, but I understood fear. That feeling stayed in my body for decades. By the time I married Elaine, I had already made myself a promise. My family would never live like that. Never. No panic. No unpaid bills. No uncertainty. I became an industrial engineer because I liked systems. Systems behaved logically. If you planned properly, you avoided disaster. Simple as that. At least, that's what I believed. Elaine was different from me from the very beginning. She liked stopping for coffee during road trips. She liked open windows and loud music in the car. She once drove 20 extra minutes because she saw a roadside farmer selling peaches. That used to charm me. Then life got expensive. Children, mortgage, insurance, college savings. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing spontaneity as joy. I started seeing it as leakage. That change happened so slowly I barely noticed it myself. The first moment I remember clearly was the county fair. Ryan was 9, Melissa was 6. It was late August, hot enough that the air smelled like sweat and fried dough. Ryan saw a ring toss booth with giant stuffed bears hanging overhead. One of them had a red ribbon around its neck. He grabbed my arm and said, "Dad, can I try?" I looked at the sign, $5 for 5 throws. I remember feeling irritated instantly. $5 for a rigged game. $5 for junk made in some overseas factory. I said, "That's how they get people." Ryan let go of my arm immediately. "Oh," he said. Then quieter, "That's okay." That should have hurt me. It didn't. Not then. I actually felt satisfied with myself. I told myself I was teaching discipline, teaching value, helping him understand money early. That's the thing about fear. When you dress it up carefully enough, it starts sounding like wisdom. We kept walking through the fairgrounds. Melissa wanted lemonade. I complained about the price before buying it. Elaine got quiet after that. Not angry, just smaller somehow. I didn't understand silence back then. I thought no argument meant everything was fine. On the drive home, Ryan leaned against the car window staring outside. The stuffed bear booth disappeared behind us in the side mirror. I remember that image very clearly now, the lights shrinking farther away. That night, I passed Ryan's bedroom before going downstairs. His door was cracked open. He was asleep, holding an old stuffed dog with one flattened ear. For maybe 2 seconds, I thought about the bear again, then my brain immediately justified the decision. $5 invested yearly becomes real money eventually. That's literally how I thought. My mind turned childhood moments into long-term calculations automatically, and I was proud of that. That pride followed me everywhere. Elaine once suggested a weekend trip to Nashville for our anniversary. Nothing extravagant, just 2 nights away, music, walking downtown, dinner somewhere we'd never tried. She left a travel brochure beside my coffee cup before work. I still remember the picture on the front, a couple laughing under string lights. I sat down and started calculating before I even loosened my tie. Hotel, gas, meals, parking, taxes, incidentals. I wrote numbers across the back with a blue pen. Elaine watched me from the kitchen sink. She already knew what was coming. I said, "If we put this toward the mortgage principal instead, we save years of interest." I expected appreciation, maybe even admiration for being disciplined. Elaine dried her hands slowly. Then she said, "Okay. Just that. Okay." No fight. No disappointment in her voice anymore. And honestly, that should have terrified me. But I interpreted surrender as agreement. That's another thing I understand now. When people stop arguing with you, it does not always mean peace. Sometimes it means exhaustion. So we stayed home instead. I grilled chicken on the back patio. Opened a bottle of discounted wine. Talked about practical things. Work schedules. Roof repairs. Ryan's math grades. At one point, I looked at Elaine and said, "This is nicer anyway." She smiled politely. But her eyes drifted toward the fence behind me. Like some part of her was somewhere else entirely. I missed that too. I missed a lot. Not because I was evil, because I was busy managing life instead of living it. That became my pattern. Every joy passed through a filter first. What does it cost? Is it necessary? Can it wait? Will this matter later? I thought those questions made me responsible. I didn't realize they were draining warmth from my family one small moment at a time. Melissa noticed it earlier than Ryan did. She was sensitive that way, always studying people carefully before speaking. At her middle school graduation, she wanted dinner at a little Italian place downtown. Nothing fancy. Red booths, garlic bread, old Frank Sinatra songs playing too loudly. She talked about the tiramisu all week. Said she wanted all of us sharing one dessert together.
I remember that detail because now it destroys me. 1 dessert, 3 spoons. Such a tiny thing. When the check came, I noticed they charged separately for bread, $3.50. I called the waiter back over, not rudely. That's important. I was calm, respectable, measured. I explained bread had always been included before. The waiter apologized politely and removed the charge. I remember feeling victorious afterward, like I had defended my family from being taken advantage of. Then I looked up. Melissa was staring down at her plate. Ryan leaned back silently. Elaine folded her napkin into smaller and smaller squares. Nobody looked angry. That would have been easier. They just looked tired. On the drive home, I asked Melissa if she enjoyed dinner. Yeah, she said softly. Then she looked out the window the rest of the drive. That should have stayed with me. Instead, I was still thinking about principle. I use that word constantly. Principle, discipline, responsibility. Those words made me feel honorable while I slowly turned every happy moment into an accounting discussion. The strange part is, after a while, money wasn't even tight anymore. We were doing very well by then.
But fear doesn't disappear just because circumstances improve. Sometimes, success feeds it. The more stable we became, the more terrified I became of losing stability. So I tightened further. More planning, more caution, more delayed gratification. I truly believed I was protecting everyone. Meanwhile, tiny things started disappearing from the house. Elaine stopped suggesting trips. Ryan stopped asking me for unnecessary things. Melissa started saying, "Never mind," before finishing sentences. At the time, I barely noticed. That's what scares me now. Nothing dramatic happened. There was no collapse. Just a slow cooling. Like warmth leaking from a room through cracks too small to see. And every year, that cardboard box in the garage grew heavier. Unused tickets. Expired plans. Postponed memories. A whole life sitting there, waiting for a better time that never arrived. The first real warning came from Elaine one Sunday night. The kids were upstairs. The weather report hummed softly from the television. Elaine sat folding towels beside me on the couch. Out of nowhere, she asked, "Do you ever feel like we're waiting for our life to start?" I honestly didn't understand the question. I said, "What do you mean?" She folded another towel carefully. Then she said, "Everything is always after something else. After the mortgage, after work calms down, after we save more, after retirement." I smiled at her patiently, like a man certain he understands adulthood better than his wife. Then I said something I wish I could take back. I said, "That's just what responsible people do." Elaine looked down at the towel in her lap. Then she nodded once, quietly, and I went back to watching the weather forecast. I didn't understand it then, but that was the moment something important began dying between us, not loudly, silently, and once silence replaces warmth in a marriage, it spreads everywhere else too, including the children. Especially the children. I didn't realize that yet, but I was about to. I didn't realize that yet, but I was about to. A few weeks after that conversation with Elaine, Ryan called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was trimming hedges in the backyard when the phone rang. Ryan rarely called during work hours. That alone made me uneasy. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered immediately. "Hey, Dad." His voice sounded tight, not emotional, controlled. That should tell you something right there. My son learned composure from me. He said his car transmission had failed outside Columbus. Repair shop estimated $2,600. I remember the exact number because numbers always stayed with me. Even now. Especially now. Ryan said, "We'll figure it out somehow." We. Not, "I need help." Not, "Can you help me?" Just, "We'll figure it out." And before I even thought about it, I slipped into advice. You should always keep a larger emergency reserve. I said it automatically. Like breathing. I explained interest rates, repair funds, long-term planning. I talked the entire time like a man reading from a manual. Ryan got quieter with every sentence. Finally he said, "Yeah, I know. That should have stopped me.
It didn't. I kept talking anyway, because somewhere deep inside me, being useful felt safer than being warm. When the call ended, I stood there in the backyard holding my phone. The hedge trimmer buzzed softly beside my shoe, and for one strange second, I realized something painful. My son never called me for comfort. Only solutions. Only logistics. Only information. I knew his credit score better than his laugh. That thought hit me hard enough I had to sit down. But even then, I defended myself. I told myself, that's adulthood. Men don't need emotional conversations. He knows I love him. I had explanations for everything back then. That was part of the problem. A few days later, Elaine and I attended Abby's winter concert at school.
Elementary school gymnasium. Bad fluorescent lighting. Tiny chairs too close together. Children waving wildly from the risers before the music even started. The old version of me would have hated the entire evening, parking hassle, crowded room, poor organization. But I sat there quietly beside Elaine, watching Abby scan the audience for us. The second she spotted us, her whole face lit up. She waved so hard her paper snowflake hat slipped sideways. Parents around us laughed softly. And suddenly I had this terrible realization. I could not clearly remember sitting through events like this when Ryan and Melissa were children. Not emotionally. I remembered leaving work early. I remembered driving there. I remembered complaining about traffic afterward. But the actual moments. Fog. Mostly fog. That frightened me more than I can explain. Because I started understanding something awful. I had physically attended my children's lives while mentally living somewhere else.
Usually in the future. Always in the future.
The choir started singing some Christmas song completely off-key. One little boy sneezed directly into the microphone, the audience burst into laughter, and for the first time in years, I noticed something obvious. Nobody cared the performance was imperfect, nobody cared the folding chairs were uncomfortable, nobody cared the evening was inefficient. Their child was on stage. That alone made the night valuable. Meanwhile, I had spent decades measuring moments by utility. Would this matter later? Was it worth the money? Could the time be better spent? Those questions followed me everywhere, like static. After the concert, Abby grabbed my hand near the cafeteria doors. Come take pictures with us, Grandpa. Normally I hated lingering after events. Everybody crowding together, parents blocking exits, children running everywhere. But I heard Elaine's voice in my head again. Do you ever feel like we're waiting for our life to start? So I stayed.
10 extra minutes.
Maybe 15. And the strangest part, it felt physically uncomfortable. Not emotionally uncomfortable, physically. Like my body itself resisted unstructured joy. I kept checking my watch automatically, kept calculating how long traffic would take leaving the parking lot. Even while smiling in photographs. That scared me deeply. Because by then, retirement had already started. I no longer had deadlines, no meetings, no schedules forcing pressure onto me. And still my mind could not relax. Fear had become habit. A few nights later, I went downstairs after midnight, couldn't sleep. That happened more often at my age. Elaine was awake too, sitting at the kitchen table reading one of her mystery novels. Or pretending to read. We had gotten good at pretending over the years. I poured myself water and sat across from her quietly. The refrigerator hummed softly behind us. Finally, I asked, "Were you unhappy?" Elaine looked up slowly.
With what? With me. That pause before she answered nearly crushed me. Not because it was long, because it existed at all. Finally, she said, "You were dependable." Dependable. Not joyful. Not comforting. Not warm. Dependable. I nodded like I understood. But inside, something started sinking heavily. I asked, was I hard to live with? Elaine stared down at the book cover for a second, then she said something I still hear constantly now. You always made everything feel expensive. That sentence stayed with me for weeks. Not just financially expensive. Emotionally expensive. Like every small joy needed justification first. Every restaurant. Every trip. Every little detour. Every spontaneous decision. I wanted reasons for all of it. Practical reasons. Future reasons. And if something could not defend itself logically, I distrusted it immediately. Even happiness. especially happiness. The next Sunday, Melissa came over with Abby after church. Ryan couldn't make it. Work trip.
At least that's what Melissa said. Maybe it was true. Maybe it wasn't. By then, I had started noticing how often my children stayed just busy enough. Never rude, never distant enough to confront. Just unavailable in careful, respectable ways. We ate lunch at the dining room table, ham sandwiches, potato salad, iced tea. Simple meal. At one point Abby asked if we could all play cards afterward. Elaine smiled immediately. Melissa said, "That sounds fun." Then both of them looked at me automatically, waiting. That moment disturbed me more than it should have. Even now, after all these years, everyone still checked my mood before relaxing fully. I said yes, too quickly, probably. Like I was trying to prove something. Abby ran into the living room cheering. We played Go Fish at the coffee table while afternoon sunlight crossed the carpet slowly. Halfway through the game, Abby knocked over her orange soda. It splashed across the cards and onto the rug. Without thinking, I snapped.
Careful.
Sharp. Instant. The room changed immediately. Abby froze. Melissa grabbed napkins quickly. Elaine stopped moving altogether. And suddenly I saw 30 years of my own household in one terrible second. Everybody adjusting emotionally around me. Everybody trying not to trigger irritation, everybody becoming smaller when my tone changed. I apologized immediately, too fast, too rehearsed. "It's okay," Abby whispered. But she stopped laughing after that. The game never recovered. And the worst part? I understood exactly why. Later that afternoon, Melissa helped me dry dishes in the kitchen. The faucet ran softly while we worked. Finally she said, "You know what I remember most growing up?" I braced myself automatically. She dried one plate carefully before answering, "You were always worried during good moments." That sentence entered me slowly. Like cold water spreading through fabric.
At restaurants, you watched prices. At games, you watched parking meters. On vacations, you watched traffic. Even birthdays stressed you out somehow. I started defending myself immediately. That's because somebody had to think responsibly. Even saying it, I sounded tired. Melissa nodded gently. "I know. That hurt worse than anger would have." Then she added quietly, "I just wish you could have been with us while you were with us." I still think about that wording. With us while you were with us. I did not answer. Because deep down, I knew she was right. My body had attended our family life. My mind kept leaving early. That evening, after everyone left, I went back into the garage again. Back to the cardboard box. By then it almost felt like confession sitting there waiting for me. I started pulling things out slowly. Unused zoo tickets. Expired concert passes. A folded campground reservation form. A brochure for Niagara Falls still held together with a paper clip.
Every object carried some quiet ache attached to it now. Then I found something small near the bottom. A diner receipt, $31.80. That was all. On the back, Elaine had written, "Best pie ever." Kids laughed the whole drive home. I stared at that sentence for a very long time. Because I barely remembered the pie. Barely remembered the diner itself. But Elaine remembered laughter. That difference devastated me. She had spent decades collecting feelings. I had spent decades tracking costs. That receipt stayed in my shirt pocket for days afterward. I kept rereading it alone. Best pie ever, kids laughed the whole drive home. Such a simple memory. And somehow I had almost lost it completely. That terrified me. Around that time, I started noticing things about myself I never questioned before. I grew tomatoes because grocery prices irritated me. I fixed appliances because repair fees annoyed me. I compared mulch prices online for over an hour one Saturday morning. Elaine walked into the study while I was doing that. She watched me silently for a moment. Then she asked, "Do you actually enjoy anything anymore?" I laughed at first. A reflex again. But the laugh faded quickly, because, honestly, I didn't know. Somewhere along the line, enjoyment itself had become suspicious to me unless it served another purpose. Even hobbies needed justification. Even rest needed productivity attached somehow. I had optimized myself into someone permanently tense. And the tragedy was, I thought that tension made me virtuous. One evening I found an old photograph stuck inside the cardboard box. Ryan and Melissa were little. Maybe 8 and 5. We were standing outside a roadside ice cream stand somewhere during summer vacation. The kids each held giant cones covered in rainbow sprinkles. Elaine was laughing at something off camera. And me? I was looking down at my watch. Not smiling. Not eating, just waiting. That picture bothered me all night. Because I honestly could not remember what urgent thing had mattered more than standing there with my family eating ice cream. Whatever it was, it's gone now. Completely gone. But the look on my face remained forever. That was when I began understanding something truly awful. My family probably remembers me exactly like that photograph. Present, responsible, reliable, and somewhere else emotionally, not cruel, just unreachable, a man standing beside joy instead of inside it. I started seeing evidence everywhere after that. Ryan always asking permission before spending money around me. Melissa apologizing automatically for little things. Elaine ordering the cheapest item without looking at the menu long. I had shaped the emotional climate of my own family without realizing it. Not through violence, not through rage, through caution, through restraint, through making every moment pass an invisible inspection first. And still, even then, part of me kept defending myself.
I thought, I gave them stability. I protected them. I kept us safe. That's the trap. When fear disguises itself as responsibility long enough, you stop recognizing it as fear. Then one night, while holding that old ice cream photograph under the garage light, another memory surfaced suddenly. Small, ordinary, almost meaningless. But the second it returned, I felt something inside me crack. And it started with a roadside ice cream stand in the summer of 1989. The memory came back all at once after that. Not slowly, not gently, like something breaking through water. It was the summer of 1989. Melissa was 7. Ryan was 10. We had spent the afternoon driving back from Sandusky after visiting Elaine's cousin. The kids were sunburned and sticky from the heat. Elaine had kicked off her sandals in the passenger seat. The windows were down because I hated wasting gas on air conditioning. I remember that detail clearly, even now.
The road curved around a patch of trees, and then we saw it. A little roadside ice cream stand. White paint peeling near the roof, red picnic tables sitting crooked on gravel, a hand-painted sign swinging slightly in the wind. Melissa pressed both hands against the window immediately. "Dad, can we stop?" Ryan leaned forward between the seats. "Please. Just for a little bit." Elaine looked over at me. Hopeful. Careful. Like she already understood the answer might disappoint everyone. I slowed the car down. That part destroys me now. For one tiny second, they all believed I was going to say yes. Melissa was already smiling. Ryan reached for his seatbelt. Elaine folded the map in her lap halfway closed. Then my mind started working. There were too many cars parked outside. We were later than planned. The kids needed baths before bed. I had work early the next morning. Roadside places overcharged for everything. We already had ice cream at home. All those thoughts flashed through me instantly. And then I said it. We have ice cream at home. The car went silent. Not angry silent, small, silent. The kind that tries not to make the disappointment worse. Ryan leaned back slowly, Melissa looked out the window again. Elaine unfolded the map carefully like nothing happened. Then I drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Melissa still looking backward, watching the stand disappear behind us. That image followed me into old age, her face in the mirror. Still hoping after the answer was already no. I sat in the garage that night staring at the photograph, Elaine laughing beside the stand. Ryan holding a cone bigger than his hand. Melissa grinning with rainbow sprinkles all over her mouth. And me, looking at my watch. Not smiling. Not eating, just waiting to leave. That was the moment something inside me finally collapsed. Because suddenly, I understood the photograph had captured the exact truth. I had spent my whole life standing beside joy instead of inside it.
I put the picture down and covered my face. My chest hurt. Not emotionally at first. Physically. Like grief had weight. I remember thinking something terrible. Something simple. My children learned how to lower their happiness around me. And I taught them that. Not with cruelty, with caution. With budgeting. With all my reasonable explanations. I had turned love into a scheduling problem. I sat there on the concrete floor for a long time. The old freezer humming beside me. My knees aching through my jeans. And memories kept arriving one after another. Ryan pretending not to care about the fare booth. Melissa going quiet at restaurants. Elaine saying, "Whatever you think," for years. Not because she agreed. Because she got tired. That realization nearly hollowed me out. My family had not stopped wanting joy. They stopped believing I would meet them there. I opened the cardboard box again. The tickets. The brochures. The folded coupons. All those little postponed moments. I used to think they represented discipline. Now they looked like headstones. Every single one marked a memory that never got to exist. I started crying then. Really crying. Not controlled. Not dignified. The kind that shakes your shoulders when nobody is watching. I cried because I had been proud of myself. That is the sentence I struggle with most. I had mistaken emotional deprivation for responsibility. I thought tension made me honorable. I thought saying no made me strong. But sitting there, at 79 years old, surrounded by old paper and dust, I saw the truth clearly for the first time. I had not protected my family from fear. I had passed my fear directly into them. Ryan learned worry, Melissa learned restraint, Elaine learned disappointment. And somehow, I called that love. That thought made me sick. I stood up too quickly and had to grab the workbench. The room tilted for a second.
Age humbles you physically before it humbles you emotionally. I carried the photograph back inside. Elaine was sitting in the den with the television on low volume. She looked up immediately when she saw my face. What happened? I handed her the picture without speaking. She looked at it quietly. Then she closed her eyes for just a second. "You remember," she said softly. Not a question. I sat across from her slowly. I should have stopped. Elaine nodded once. Yes. No anger, no lecture. That almost made it worse. I said, "I thought I was being responsible." "You usually did." That sentence carried decades inside it. I wanted to explain myself. My childhood, money fears, pressure, security, but suddenly, explanations sounded pathetic. Because intentions do not erase absence. I said, "I don't know how to fix any of this." Elaine rested the photograph in her lap. "You can't fix it." That landed hard. You can't give the kids back those years. I looked down at my hands. You can't become a different man overnight. She was right. My habits lived in my muscles by then. Even after retirement, I still checked prices automatically. Still rushed through moments. Still tightened whenever things became messy or unplanned. Fear had built itself a permanent room inside me. Elaine looked at the photograph again. Then she said quietly, "But maybe you can stop ruining what's left." That sentence stayed with me. What's left? At my age, those words carry weight. Because there is less left than there used to be. That night, I barely slept. Around 4 in the morning, I sat alone at the kitchen table listening to the refrigerator hum. I kept thinking about time. Not dramatic time, ordinary time. Car rides. School nights. Saturday mornings. Things I once treated like endless resources, now they felt expensive beyond comprehension. I would have traded every dollar I saved for one relaxed afternoon back with my children. 1. That is the terrible arithmetic of regret. You spend decades valuing the wrong currency. The next morning, I called Ryan. Not because something broke, not because I had advice. Just called. He answered after several rings. "Hey, Dad." His voice carried caution immediately. I heard it clearly now. A man preparing himself emotionally before speaking to his father. I almost retreated into practical conversation. Weather, work, sports, safe territory. Instead, I said, I've been thinking about that ice cream stand. Silence. Then, oh. He remembered immediately. Of course he did. Children remember where disappointment lives. I said, I should have stopped. Ryan let out a slow breath. It was a long time ago. That sentence broke my heart more than anger would have, because it sounded practiced, like something he learned saying to himself years earlier. I swallowed hard. I'm sorry. Long silence again. Finally, okay. Just okay. Not forgiveness. Not closeness. Just acknowledgement. And, honestly, I deserved less than that.
We talked awkwardly another minute before hanging up. The whole conversation felt unfamiliar, like two men trying to walk across thin ice without looking down. Afterward, I sat there staring at my phone. I realized I had spent years teaching my children how not to need me emotionally. I had succeeded. That success felt horrifying now. Later that afternoon, I called Melissa. She answered cheerfully at first, then cautious when she realized I sounded emotional. I asked if she remembered the roadside stand. She laughed softly. The rainbow sprinkles place. The fact she had named it that all these years hurt deeply. I said, I'm sorry, I kept driving. Silence. Then, Mom was upset for hours after that. I closed my eyes. I didn't know. I know, she said quietly. That sentence crushed me completely. Not, you didn't care. You didn't know. Because she was right. I truly did not know what my choices felt like to other people. That is what fear had done to me. It narrowed my world until all I could see was prevention. After the call ended, I drove back to that road. The stand was still there, different paint. New owners, probably, but still there. I parked across the street for almost 20 minutes before getting out. Families stood around eating soft serve in the evening heat. Children dropping napkins, parents laughing. Nobody optimizing anything, nobody turning happiness into a calculation. Just people wasting time together, and suddenly I understood something painfully simple. The moments I called waste were actually life. I walked to the window slowly. The teenage girl inside asked what I wanted. My first instinct was still restraint. Small cone, plain vanilla, minimal cost. Even then, even standing inside my regret, that old reflex still reached for control. Then I stopped myself. I'll take a large twist cone, I said, with rainbow sprinkles. The girl smiled. Good choice. I almost cried hearing that, good choice. Such an ordinary sentence. But I had made so few good emotional choices back then. I sat alone at one of the picnic tables. The cone started melting immediately down my hand. Years ago, that would have irritated me. Sticky fingers, messy shirt, waste. This time I just sat there quietly. The evening sun hit the gravel gold. Children laughed behind me. Cars rolled past slowly on the road. And for once in my life, I let a moment stay exactly what it was, temporary, messy, pointless, beautiful. Not productive, not efficient, just alive. I cried again, sitting there. Not loudly. Old men rarely cry loudly, we leak grief slowly, by then. I cried because the children in my memories were now grandparents themselves. I cried because Elaine's hair had turned white while waiting for me to loosen up. I cried because ordinary moments do not stay available forever. One day the window closes quietly. And nobody announces it when it happens. That is the cruel part. You do not know the moment becomes precious until years later. I brought Elaine back there the next afternoon. The drive was mostly silent. Not hostile silence. Careful silence. The kind older couples carry after long disappointment. When we pulled into the gravel lot, Elaine stared at the stand a long time. Then she said softly, they repainted it. I nodded. We ordered combs. Mine with rainbow sprinkles, hers dipped in chocolate. We sat together at the picnic table, not close exactly, but not far either. A little girl nearby dropped her cone and burst into tears. Her father immediately bought another one. No lecture. No frustration. Just another cone. I watched that quietly. Then I looked down at my own melting ice cream. And I thought, that was all my children ever wanted. Not perfection. Not money. Just softness. Elaine handed me extra napkins when the cone dripped onto my wrist. "You're making a mess," she said. For the first time in decades, I laughed without defending myself.
A small laugh, but real.
Nothing healed magically after that. I want to tell the truth about that. Ryan still sounds careful sometimes. Melissa still apologizes too quickly. Elaine still watches my face before suggesting things occasionally. Damage adapts itself into people, especially over decades. But something changed in me afterward. Not dramatically, quietly. I stopped rushing every moment toward usefulness. I stopped treating joy like poor financial planning. I started staying longer, listening more, correcting less. Some days, I still fail. Fear does not disappear politely after living inside you 40 years. Sometimes, I still check prices automatically. Sometimes, I still tense up over small messes. But now I notice it. Now I stop. That matters. At least, I hope it does. A few weeks ago, Ryan texted me a photograph. Abby holding an ice cream cone covered in rainbow sprinkles. Underneath he wrote, "She asked for extra this time." I stared at that picture for several minutes. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and cried again. Because love had not disappeared completely. It had just survived me differently than I expected. That is the thing I understand now. A good life is not built from numbers alone. You can save money and still impoverish a room emotionally. You can protect everyone financially while starving them gently. And the frightening part is how respectable it looks while it's happening. Nobody warns you. People praise discipline, they praise sacrifice, they praise hard work. Very few people ask whether your family still feels warm around you. So, let me say something I wish somebody had said to me decades ago: you can save every dollar and still lose the day. That sentence feels carved into me now. I'm not telling you to be reckless. Pay your bills, save for retirement, prepare wisely. But do not make your family earn joy through justification. Do not force every happy impulse through an approval process. And please, do not assume love automatically arrives through responsibility alone. Sometimes, love looks much smaller than that. Sometimes it looks like stopping the car. Sometimes it looks like staying 10 extra minutes. Sometimes, it looks like rainbow sprinkles melting down your hand while somebody beside you laughs. At 79, I understand something painfully well. The future is important. But someday is a dangerous place to live permanently. Because one morning you wake up old. Your children have wrinkles. Your wife moves slower. The house gets quieter. And suddenly you realize the ordinary Tuesdays were the whole thing. Not the retirement account, not the paid-off mortgage. Not the numbers. Just the small moments you kept postponing until there were fewer left. If this story stayed with you, maybe stay a while longer here with us. There are more stories like mine. Stories from people who learned important things very late. And maybe one of them reaches you earlier than life reached me. If you want to help this channel, you can like the video and subscribe. But more importantly, if someone you love asks you for a small moment today, try not to rush past it. The ice cream melts faster than you think.